Okay guys, so we're back. It is a few days later. I'm not really sure how many. I haven't been keeping count, but I've got a little bit of free time. So I went ahead and I jacked up the front of the vehicle and I put it on some jack stands. These are Harbor Freight jack stands, but they are not the recalled ones. And I've owned these jack stands for like 10 years and I've never had a problem with it. I'm still alive. Anyway, so I've got the vehicle up on jack stands. Now I'm gonna go underneath. I'm going to remove the transmission mounting bolts from the engine block. I'm going to remove the exhaust bolts. I'm also going to remove the starter so I can get to the torque converter bolts and whatever various other things I need to disconnect down there. So let's go ahead and move underneath the vehicle. All right guys, so we are underneath the vehicle. And first thing I'm gonna do, excuse me for my squeaky crawler. The first thing I'm gonna attack are gonna be these exhaust flange bolts or nuts. As you can see, I already went ahead and I soaked them down in PB Blaster on both sides. So they're nice and soaked. And these are 15 millimeter nuts. So I'm gonna go ahead and try to bust these off. Now let's see if I can get to the second one. That one's kind of hidden behind the oxygen sensor there. Yeah, it looks like I'm gonna have to remove this oxygen sensor to get to this nut. All right, so I use this 22 millimeter wrench to break loose the oxygen sensor. Now I'm gonna go ahead and take it off by hand. And this should give us access to get to that nut. Yeah, it's pretty much a straight shot right there. Let's go ahead and get our impact, see if we can fit it in there. There we go. Let me grab our little nut. That thing's hot. Now we'll do the same thing to the other side. Hopefully we don't have to remove anything here. Let's see if I can get to this bolt back there. Got the exhaust unbolted. Next up, I'm gonna go ahead and attack the starter motor from the other side. Removing the starter is pretty simple. We have two bolts right here, look like 13 millimeter. And this is gonna be for the ground strap as well. So I'm gonna go ahead and bust these off. Bust that nut off there. Take the ground cable off. And let's go ahead and take off this bolt down here. The bottom bolt for the starter. There we go. Now let's see if we can get to the top bolt right here. Maybe I can just use my little gun. Hopefully I can fit it in there. I think I got it on there now. There we go. Now, just be careful to not let the starter fall on my face. Pull this out. Oh, got some dripping on me. Let me move out of the way. It's got some coolant or something coming out of there. I'm not sure what that is. All right, so let's move the starter out of the way. There we go. No need to remove the cable or anything. We're just gonna let it hang. And now that gives us access to the torque converter bolts. Okay guys, so now it's time to remove the torque converter nuts. In my case, there's 4 of them. Pretty simple to remove. I have this long breaker bar here, and I have this 19 millimeter socket on the harmonic balancer or the crank bolt. And I'm going to turn the engine over. Pay attention to that flywheel. We're going to spin the engine over until we see a torque converter nut. See me going clockwise there. And see one creeping up right there. Then I'm going to take my 14 millimeter on my 3/8 impact. Again, I'm sorry about the squeaky crawler. Let me go ahead and bust this nut off here. Like so. Then you do the same thing for the rest of them. All right guys, so now it's time to take the transmission bell housing bolts off. They are 13 millimeter. And there's 4 of them that I can get from the bottom here. But I think the rest of them I'm gonna have to get from the top. So let's go ahead and take these off. Just use my little 13 millimeter impact. Take these off. I'm gonna have to put the camera down to do the rest of these. Okay guys, let me apologize. I stopped filming last night. It was getting dark outside and I was getting pretty frustrated. Plus the battery on my camera was starting to die. So I apologize for not getting to film everything, but essentially I went ahead and I removed all of the transmission bolts. Now I was able to get 4 of them from the bottom and 3 from the top. And then there was one I had to get from the passenger side wheel well. So I removed the wheel, and had to kind of move this over. There's this little flap right here. Had to remove it, and there's a transmission bolt that I had to get from this side. And now we have the transmission completely disconnected. I also removed the bracket for the transmission lines and unplugged the rest of the connectors. Now the only thing left to do is to unbolt the motor mounts, and we're ready to pull this engine out. Now, as far as the engine goes, I called around to several different salvage yards in the area, and I did find a couple different engines. One of them being out of a Mustang, which is the same engine, but it had relatively low miles. I did find another one out of an Explorer. They wanted like $1,200 for it, but it had like 160,000 miles, which to me was just kind of out of the mileage range that I was looking for. The Mustang engine is way cheaper. They're only asking $600 for it cash, and it's got around 100,000 miles. So I figured it was worth going to check out. So let's go ahead and do that. All right, guys, so we're here at the salvage yard, and they had the motor that I needed, but it's actually coming out of a Mustang. Take you guys over here. Now, they were able to crank it up for me so I could hear that it was running, and it didn't sound like it had any timing chain rattle. Looks like they just pulled the motor out of the car right now. Take a look at this car, guys. This Mustang was in a rollover accident. Man, hopefully they survive that. All right, so they're gonna separate the transmission. We're gonna load it up in the back of the truck. All right, so they got our motor out. Getting ready to load it up in the back of the truck here. Gracias. All right, guys, so now that we have the motor in the back of the truck, we need an engine hoist. We need an engine hoist. I don't have one. The one I had at the shop, I sold it when I sold the shop, and it was really kind of tricky trying to find someone that would lend me an engine hoist. And on top of that, I think it's probably a good idea for me to buy one anyway, because I'm going to be doing the engine and the nitro in the near future. Anyways, I found Northern Tool had a good deal on a 2-ton engine hoist that comes with the load leveler for $260, which is the price I found online. Hopefully they're able to match that price in the store. So we're here at Northern Tool. Let's go ahead and see if we can get this engine hoist. All right, guys, so this is the unit I'm looking at. As you can see, it's got a price tag of $259.99, and it comes with the load leveler. So it seems like a pretty good deal. I'm gonna go ahead and pick this one up. Looks like this thing comes in 2 separate boxes, so let me load these up in the truck. All right, so we got this thing loaded up. Let's go ahead and take it to the house. Oh man, so check this out, guys. I'm on the way home, and I come across this Mustang that just got into an accident. Hopefully nobody was hurt. I'm a big Mustang fan, so every time I see one wrecked, you know, it hurts a little bit. All right, guys, so we got the engine hoist here at the house. Only problem is I got to put this thing together. So yeah, this ought to be a lot of fun. All right, guys, so after a couple of hours, we finally got this thing assembled. And thanks to my daughter, Amelia. Thank you for the help. Give me a high five. Say hi to the people.
Hello.
Thank you for all your help. Let's get this motor out of this truck. Okay, it's time to hook up the engine crane to the engine. But before we can do that, let's go ahead and remove this hood. Well, guys, step one is done. We have the old engine out of the vehicle. Now it's time to start switching over some pieces to the used engine and get it put back together. All right, guys, so let me show you the replacement motor. Again, this motor came out of a Mustang, so there are some subtle differences. It is the same block, the same cylinder head, the same oil pan, all of that good stuff. But as far as the accessories, the bolt onto the motor, there are going to be some differences. Things like the intake manifold. I'm going to take this one off, scrap it. We're going to be replacing it with the Explorer manifold. The valve covers are different, but again, we had a valve cover gasket leak anyways. We needed to replace the gaskets. Also, the exhaust manifolds are different, so we're going to be taking these off, putting on the exhaust manifolds from the Explorer. A few other differences: the pulley brackets on the front, I already went ahead and removed them, but all of that's going to be different. So I'm going to be putting on the brackets from the Explorer onto this motor, but that's no big deal. I'm also switching over the water pump. I'm going to take the water pump off of the Explorer motor. And if you look over here, I got a box of goodies. So I've got a bunch of parts that I'm going to be replacing. I've got a spark plug wire set, the belt, oil filter. I'm going to be replacing the spark plugs. So we're getting new Motorcraft spark plugs. And I've got a bunch of gaskets that we needed. Exhaust manifold gaskets, valve cover gasket set, the belt, of course, fuel filter. We've got the intake manifold gaskets. I've got oil filter. Also, these are the nylon O-rings for the power steering line. And what else do we have here? Oh, the water pump gasket. So again, like I said, I'm swapping the water pump over. Oh, and also we should have a rear main seal somewhere in here because again, while we have this motor out, it's simple enough to replace the rear main seal while we have it here. Easy access. This engine, you can tell, has been leaking some oil from the valve cover. So we've got, you know, some oil kind of caked on the back here. We're just going to clean it up with some brake clean. But the most important thing I wanted to show you guys was the timing chain. Again, we're looking at the back of the motor here, and I've already gone ahead and removed the valve covers and inspected the timing chains. This one, let me just take it off here. All right, so we can take a close look. Let me get up on the truck here. All right, so looking at the cylinder head on the passenger side, again, this is the back of the motor, and here's our timing chain. And as you can see, our guide is still intact, and the chain is a little bit sloppy here. But if you look over here where the tensioner is, you can tell that this tensioner is fully compressed because the tensioner spring is completely worn out. So what I also have are some new tensioners. I'm going to be replacing both of these tensioners. If you look at the timing chain up on the front here, you can tell this timing chain is in good shape because it has absolutely no play in the chain whatsoever. So this is nice and tight, but we're going to be replacing this tensioner anyway while we have it out. Again, I've already started taking apart this engine, and of course this came out of a manual transmission, so I had to remove the flywheel and the clutch and all that good stuff. But the automatic transmission should bolt right up to this block, no problem. All right, guys, something I wanted to add real quick. When I took a look at the rear main seal in the package, I noticed that this seal came with some kind of sleeve, like a metal sleeve on the inside of it. And I was curious as to whether that sleeve was some type of installation tool or what it was. And after digging for some information, I found out that there's a technical service bulletin from Ford about this seal. So apparently, when you install the seal, you have to install it with this metal sleeve here and leave that sleeve installed onto the crankshaft. The only problem is that it requires the use of a special tool that I don't have. And to be honest with you guys, the tool, I looked it up, is around $100. I called different friends of mine. Nobody seems to have this tool available. So, I mean, my only option is to order the tool spend $100 on it and use it only one time. But the thing is that I have to have this motor into this truck today because, like I said, I'm moving, I'm running out of time. So this motor has to be in this truck today. I don't have time to order a tool and wait 2 to 3 days for it to get here. And I'm looking at the seal and I'm thinking that, you know, it doesn't look too bad. It doesn't look like it was leaking any oil. So rather than mess with it, I think I'm just going to leave it alone because I don't want to try to install the seal without using the special tool and make it even worse. So like I said, judging by it, it doesn't really look like the rear main seal was leaking anyway. So I'm just going to leave it the way it is. And to be honest with you guys, I'm really only trying to get at least another year out of this truck before we decide to find something new. So I'm okay with things not being perfect. You know, in a perfect world, I would love to replace this rear main seal because it's here, it's easy to get to. Like I said, I just don't have the tool. I don't know anyone who does, and it's going to take me too long to get the tool. I got to get this motor done, so I'm going to skip that part. Okay guys, so we're back. Let me apologize. It's actually been at least 3 weeks since I've been back to work on the vehicle. Let me explain to you guys. So I got the motor out, but you know, I kind of had a lot of things going on at the time. We ended up closing on the house. Then I had to move, and there was a lot of things going on. We had to get furniture, and moving can be really hectic. So, and the thing is that we moved about an hour away from my parents' house, which is where we're at right now. It really took some time for me to get everything adjusted. And during all this time, I had a lot of work that was just getting backed up. So, you know, I didn't have a whole lot of time to come over here. I was busy with work and busy with moving. So I've got a little bit of free time. I managed to get out here. Let me catch you guys up with where we're at. So again, we have the old motor out of the vehicle, and I have the replacement motor here. Now, what I did last time was I removed the valve covers to inspect the engine, specifically to inspect the timing chains. Let me show you guys what I found. So up here in the front, we got the front timing chain, and I noted that this chain was nice and tight. So I didn't see any issues here. Really happy with that. I went ahead and I removed the valve cover on the other side. And what I found was that the chain on this side, which is the back of the engine, was kind of loose. And I noticed that this guide was kind of loose. So I went ahead and I unbolted this here. There's a little bolt on the guide. And I realized that the guide was actually cracked at the bottom. So I took a little camera, I stuck it down in here, and I noticed that where the two pieces connect, it was actually split. So this piece, it didn't totally come apart, not like on the old engine. The old engine, this thing completely disintegrated. This one didn't do that. This one just snapped right here. So, you know, it was just the beginning of, you know, before some catastrophic failure happened like it did on the other one. The other thing that I noticed was that when I double checked the timing, so if you look at the marks here on the camshafts, I went ahead and I lined it up on this engine, and I noticed that the bank on this side was actually off. So I know for a fact the timing is off on this engine, the old one. So, you know, I'm worried about piston to valve contact. That's really a major concern of mine. So what I decided to do was just go ahead and stick with this motor. A couple reasons. Number one is that this was the only one I could find with decent mileage. All of the ones that I found, you know, they were like 150,000 miles, and they wanted like $1,100 for them. I got this motor for like $600, and it's got under 100,000 miles on it. So this to me seemed like a pretty good option. And even though we have to replace the timing chain guide on the back here, overall this engine looks like it's in better condition, or was more taken care of than the other one. So if you look up here, it's nice and clean. You can tell they'd been doing their oil changes. And the motor that I pulled out of my wife's truck, I mean, you can see all this sludge here. So, you know, overall, this engine is in better condition. Now, there are a lot of things I'm gonna have to swap over. I'm gonna have to swap over the intake manifold, the valve covers, the exhaust manifolds. I'm gonna go ahead and replace the timing chain on the back here and the guide. And I'm gonna be replacing the tensioners on both of the cylinder heads. So after we do that, I feel like this should be a good engine. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay guys, so maybe one of you can enlighten me on what's going on here. So I went ahead and I removed the rear camshaft gear, and I went ahead and I pulled the cassette out. This is the broken cassette on the ground here. Then I went ahead and I removed the bolt for the rear jack shaft. So I was ready to pull this out with the timing chain, but I'm running into a dilemma here with this rear jack shaft, or the jack shaft gear. So let me show you guys. I'm gonna put the camera in here. As you can see, I have the bolt out, and when I pull the gear forward, it'll come out all the way, but I can't lift it out of the hole. Let me show you guys what I mean. So I have this little hook tool. I'm just going to hook it into the gear on the back side right there. I'm hooked in. I can pull this all the way out, but it hits the block and I can't lift up on it. No matter what I do, I can't lift up on it. And so I looked at it through the top of the cylinder head. And let me show you guys what's going on here. If you look way down in there, let me see if it works better without the light here. Okay, so hopefully you guys can see the gear for the jack shaft down there at the bottom. It's pulled out. I'm gonna push it back in. You see how I push that in? Now I'm going to pull it back out. Just gonna use this little screwdriver. Okay, so take a look at that gear. When I pull it out, it's got a sleeve on the back of it. Can you guys see this big sleeve on the back side of this gear? That looks like it's a part of the gear, and it's actually pretty long. You see, I try to pull this gear all the way out, and it just is not coming out. Let me see if I can zoom you guys in there. That's as far as this thing goes, and it looks like there's still plenty of sleeve that needs to come out. So no matter what I do, I cannot get this gear for the rear jack shaft out. Now, I've tried to research this to see if there's different designs that have a jack shaft gear that is just not removable, but I couldn't find any information. And I mean, guys, like, if you take a look at this, there's nowhere else for this thing to come out. I don't know, at this point, I really don't have time to mess with it. I think I'm just gonna have to install the new cassette, leave that chain on there, and put everything back together. All right, guys, so we're back. It's actually the next day. So I had some issues yesterday trying to time the engine because, of course, I don't have the timing tool, but I figured out how to do it, and I wanted to show you guys, especially for those of you who are trying to do this and you don't want to buy the tool, or if you're trying to do something like me where I was only trying to replace the chain on the back. I didn't want to have to retime the whole engine. So let me show you guys how I did it. So if we move over to the front of the engine, you'll see where the crankshaft is at. Let me show you guys where the crankshaft pulley is at. So if you look at the crankshaft pulley, you'll notice that where the crank sensor is, there is a pointer here and there's a mark on the pulley. First of all, you want to line up that mark, and you want to make sure that you're on cylinder number 1, top dead center. So I went ahead and I pulled the spark plug out of the hole here, and I turned the engine over to make sure that our cylinder number 1 piston was at top dead center compression stroke. And once we had that lined up, I came over to the camshaft, and again, I know that this one is in timing, so I come over here and I take a look at the little half moon that's here. So what you want is for the smaller half moon to be on the bottom side and the larger half moon on the top side. Now, what the tool is trying to achieve is it's trying to make the line going across the center here parallel with the surface of the cylinder head. So if you take a look, you'll see that this is flat and this is flat to the cylinder head. So that means it's in timing. Now we want to do the same thing to the other side. And so I tried to find various different items I could put in there to use to try to line it up with the surface of the cylinder head. And what I found to be the easiest and the most accurate was just a little Allen key or an Allen wrench. Now, I'm not sure what size this is. I have a little pack here. If you guys have something like this, then just try to find the right size that just kind of fits right into the slot there. You guys see, nice and snug. It fits perfectly. Now, the only problem that I had was that when I stuck this in there, you guys can see there's kind of a gap in between the surface of the cylinder head here and this Allen key. So my next task was to fill that gap with something. And I noticed that it was pretty close to where the bolt hole was. Not perfect, but you guys can see it's pretty close. And I took a look at the gap, and I figured that that gap was probably about the thickness of the head of the bolt that fits into that hole. So let me show you guys. I found a little bolt. Now, the nice thing about this bolt is that it has kind of a concave head, so you guys can see where it dips in at the top. That's nice because it can actually hold the Allen key into place. So basically what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to screw this bolt into the hole here in the cylinder head, and I'm going to screw it down all the way till it's flush. Now I'm just going to snug it with the wrench, and then I'm going to install the Allen key. And as you guys can see, this lines it up perfectly with the cylinder head, and that's how we can keep this engine in time. So what I went ahead and I did was I did the same technique on the other side of the cylinder head, and I was able to actually lock it down. And I used a pair of vice grips. You guys can see I have it vice gripped onto the camshaft here just to hold it in place. But really, using this Allen key did exactly what I needed it to do. So now the engine is in time. I'm ready to start transferring over some parts. We're gonna try to get this thing running today. All right, so as you guys can see, we're just about ready to go in with the motor. I went ahead and I transferred over the water pump from the other motor, the exhaust manifolds, the brackets for the motor mounts. I also went ahead and I replaced the gaskets for the oil filter adapter. Those are real common to leak. I figured while I have it out, I should go ahead and change it. I'm gonna wait till we have the motor in the vehicle to install the valve covers because I don't want a chance cracking them when we go in with the motor. As you guys can see, if I spin this thing around, we've got the flywheel installed. Everything's ready to go. Again, our new timing chain cassette back here. Everything's all together, ready to go. So let's go ahead and drop this thing in. Okay guys, let me apologize. My camera overheated while I was filming the time lapse of us putting the engine into the vehicle. It was actually really hot today. I think it was somewhere over 100 degrees Fahrenheit at the peak midday, and the sun was really brutal. So, I mean, I got to the point where I really wasn't worried about the camera. I was trying to do as much as I could. Again, it was just really exhausting. So let me show you guys where I'm at right now. We got the motor in. I've got everything at the bottom done. So I went ahead and I tightened up the transmission bolts, the motor mounts. I replaced the motor mount on this side because that mount was broken. I went ahead and connected everything that needed to be connected at the bottom. Once I got all of that done, I went ahead and I dropped the vehicle onto the ground so I can continue working up here. Now what I went ahead and did up here is I put the valve covers on. I also put the fuel rail on. I cleaned up all of the injectors because they were really dirty. And now I'm getting ready to put the brackets on, put the intake manifold on, put the fan on, bleed the cooling system, and try to get this thing running. Now, it's already like 8:30 p.m. at night, so it's starting to get dark outside. I don't know if I'm gonna finish it tonight. I'm gonna try to. I've just been at this all day. I'm pretty tired. I really haven't had anything to eat, but I really just wanna get this thing done so I don't have to come back tomorrow and finish anything up. Anyways, with all of that being said, I'm gonna try to finish it up tonight. If not, I'm gonna have to come back tomorrow.
6.5 hours later.
All right guys, so it is currently 3 o'clock in the morning. I've been at this thing all day. Now, before you guys talk a bunch of mess, say whatever you want, this thing was a nightmare. I kept running into problem after problem after problem. I had bolts that I had to drill out that broke off. I had wiring issues, so the mass airflow sensor wiring over here shorted out. So it blew the fuse. When I got the engine running, it was running like crap. I had to diagnose that. I had to figure out what was going on. Of course, the truck has been sitting for a month. The battery was completely dead, so I had to charge that thing up. And now I'm not even sure if the battery's any good anymore. Probably still gonna need to replace the battery. Anyways, I just had so many issues, so many little things that I had to take care of one at a time. But we finally got this thing running nice and smooth. It sounds really quiet, no more timing chain noise. I'm really happy with the way this thing came out. Now I'm ready to call it a night. I gotta take a shower, get some sleep, and get some food in my stomach. Okay guys, so fast forward. It's now been 3 days since I finished the truck. Everything's running great, absolutely no oil leaks. Let me start this thing up and show you guys. There's my daughter up there, up on the truck. Say hi. All right, so I'm gonna get into this thing. Start it up. Key on. Cranks and starts right up. And the best part is that we don't have a check engine light. Now let me take you guys under the hood real quick. Okay, so moving under the hood. Like I said, when I put this back together, I had a lot of little difficulties that I was running into. But at the end of the day, I got everything put back together. The only thing I still need to do is this alternator cable here actually runs down underneath. And I guess when I was putting the motor in, that wire fell underneath the motor mount bracket. And so it doesn't stretch long enough for this little tab here to bolt down onto the stud for the alternator here. But I'm gonna have to take the starter off, reroute that wiring up over the motor mount in order to fix that. I mean, I'm not in a hurry to do that. I'm probably gonna do that this weekend. Again, it's something minor. It doesn't really affect the performance of it. It's just something that we don't want causing a problem later on. Now, the only other thing I wanted to address before I ended the video, some of you guys may have noticed this little accident that my wife got into. This is something we're gonna be fixing pretty soon here. I've already talked to my buddy, the paint guy. We're gonna go ahead and replace this upper and lower bumper, have them painted. Probably gonna make a video about that. So if you're interested, please look out for that video in the future. Anyways, guys, like I always say, thank you for watching the video. I hope you found it useful. I hope you found it informational. If you did, make sure to give it a thumbs up. If you haven't done so already, make sure you subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Thanks.